Wyatt H on YouTube. How do you deal with the pH of the fruit puree to keep it balanced and not too tart? Couple of things. One, I only add enough hops to a beer in order to make it street legal. Street legal just simply means that beer has to have hops in it. And so sometimes I will add samples, like the little 1-ounce samples of something that people send to me that I don't want to use for anything else, or I know I don't like their product and they just sent me a bunch of samples. And so I'll just save those and use those. Like I'll just throw in an ounce like at the beginning in 15 barrels. So like literally it's nothing. I don't want my bitterness in a beer like that competing with the acid that I'm using. Now it's important to note that I am using 12 boxes, so roughly 504 pounds of fruit in a 15 barrel fermentation. And I am fermenting that fruit out. So it's not going to have all of its residual sugar to stick along with it. So I am adding a good amount of fruit, and it will bring a fair amount of acidity, especially depending on fruit type that you're using. So I do try to almost eliminate bitterness from the equation. I will try to prop up sweetness with my grain bill. I like to use low Lovabond crystal malt, really like 10 and under on the Lovabond scale for pushing up residual sweetness in a beer like that. And you can always use lactose in different things, but I like to keep lactose out of my beers as much as I can because it stops some people from drinking them. And I want everyone to drink my beer. That's kind of the deal. Now, fun one. If you have made a fruit beer and it is too tart, I got some great advice from Beechwood Barbecue. He runs like 1,000,000 miles a day. His name's slipping me right now, but it'll come to me as soon as I stop trying to remember. The head brewer brewmaster at Beechwood Barbecue out in California, he had talked about adjusting the Forrest Gump. Yes, September. That's eventually where Forrest stopped running, was at Beechwood Barbecue. And he just started winning tons of awards. But yeah, great talk by that guy at the last CBC I went to. And he was talking about pushing pH of finished beer back up. And what he recommended was using food grade slaked lime and making a slurry out of it using hot liquor tank water, hydrating it, and then pushing it in line as you're transferring a beer into the bright tank. So for me, for instance, Julian Trago, kaboom, thank you. High fives to September and June. Great talk by Julian. I absolutely loved it. If you have access to that or just any podcast stuff you can get from him, I used to listen to the Brewing Network back in the day when he did too. So he's one of those dudes that I remember from back in the day and like the forums and listening to the live stream show, the Sunday session when they were doing that. So yeah, Julian's a good dude, talented guy. He helped me out a ton because I was making this pastry stout. And so massive starting gravity, massive finishing gravity. But I knew that I was going to hit it with a bunch of raspberry, and raspberry is really acidic. So I have all this sweetness on this side and then all this acid on this side. And I put in the beer, it fermented it out, it finished, and I tasted it, and man, it was too acidic and it was so lean. And even with all that residual sugar in it, it was just flat and boring. And I was sweating it. September, you would be able to find that interview under the, if they store it by conference, it's on it would be CBC talks from 2022 at the conference. And maybe, I think he was explicitly talking fruit beer in that, and so worthwhile, man. So worthwhile. Great talk. He had talked about pushing pH when you go too tart. Well, not too tart, but when you go tart with fruit beers, one of the metrics you can do is you can push the pH back up utilizing food grade slake lime. I hit it. We bounced back and forth some stuff. And that pastry stout that I did was down at 3.8 on the pH scale because of all that acid that I had added from the raspberry. And then I bumped it back up. He gave me the calculations he uses for it and everything, and he was super quick to answer. And I just love stuff like that. That's exactly what we're supposed to be doing as brewers. So yeah, I love that. But he told me exactly how they were adjusting pH, and how much like lime it was required kind of per barrel. And man, it took that beer from 3.8 to 4.2, and it became jammy and full. It was this chocolate raspberry pastry stout that we did. And I know not everybody's into pastry stout, but I'm not gonna lie, man, it was really good. It was a really good version of that. Like, that's not a beer I'm gonna drink all the time, but it was tasty as hell. I will say that. And just driving that pH up just cut some of that acidity and just let that raspberry play off all of the sugar in there. Once I neutralized some of that acid, bro, it was just jammy and round and beautiful. I was pleased with the beer. It was very cool. Yeah, Julian Trago. If you get a chance, support that man. Tons of they got all sorts of stuff going on over there. Beechwood Barbecue. I think they have multiple locations. Show that man some love. So why that's how I do that. Those are some of the metrics when I'm using an elevated amount of fruit, and potentially generating too much acidity in that beer. I'm dropping bitterness out of the beer, potentially propping it up with some non-fermentable sugar from my grist. I prefer low Lovibond crystal for that. That's what I use crystal wheat from Malt Europe for a ton. And then kind of final straw, you can always bump pH back up if you find that you've gone too low. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you feel as if you got any value out of the video, please like and subscribe. There are also other videos that you can watch. They're gonna maybe be over here or over here. Appreciate you watching.